which college is best for me. So thank you all for coming. This is the webinar I promised you all. We're going to be discussing CC versus a 4-year in the context of COVID-19. So as most of you may know, a lot of the CSU campuses specifically have declared online classes for the fall. What does that mean for housing? We don't exactly know yet. So if any of you, know seniors or, are seniors yourselves that, put in a housing deposit, we're not exactly sure and want to tell you guys to like get that money back. The idea behind them, doing online classes is to obviously keep everyone safe because of the virus, but a lot of the issues that students are having is, why am I paying so much extra money when I could just go to a CC? So then the issue then, the discussion itself then becomes, is it worth it, right? Is it worth it to pay that much money if I'm going to be doing online classes anyway? And we're going to explore that idea a little bit, but have any of you seen posts like this? Well, I'll let you read it real quick. If you haven't, that's fine. If you did and you want to say something about it, yeah, there you go. Thank you, Ruth. Yeah, one of my seniors sent me this and I replied because it got me a little riled up because, well, a lot of people, like a gap year, what a gap year is, it's just basically a year off. You graduate high school and you're chilling. You're like working or you're doing something else. Your intention isn't to go straight into college. The issue here is he's basically weighing that, the CSU system isn't worth it, because of the tuition they charge at the full college experience. We're going to explore that because tuition itself to attend, like, for example, SJSU, isn't that much money. I mean, at least compared to like how much money it costs to live on campus and go to school. We're going to break up those costs a little bit. And then he's also talking about something interesting here, the full college experience. Now, the full college experience is, as many of you may know, consists of like, living on campus, eating in the dining halls, sleeping in the dorm, hanging out with your friends at like midnight, right? Like those are the kind of things that encompass the college experience. And for people who go to community college, the only really things that are available to them are the organizations they can join, and then also the classes they can take, right? So they don't really get that. He's saying they don't really get that experience, but we're going to explore that today. So what if I got into a 4-year? So let's say, for those of you that aren't seniors, let's say like maybe a few years from now or a year from now, you end up applying and you get into a 4-year. I would like you, and I encourage you to treat it as an opportunity. Getting into a 4-year is very much a privilege. Not everyone has that opportunity. You don't really know about finances until the end of the road, which is like, towards the end of the year. But as far as like preparing an application, that takes a lot of work. And especially for like a UC, so like if I'm applying to like UC Santa Cruz or UC Berkeley or UC Davis, I'm gonna need like my high school resume. I'm gonna need to list all my accomplishments, all my leaderships, all this stuff that your counselors have probably been talking to you about. This is where you get to list it. And that's a culmination of your work throughout high school. And it's important to recognize that that in of itself is hard work too. So what you're doing is creating an opportunity for yourself and for your family too. If you're the first in your family, props to you. Just talking about community college in this context as an option, because it's always an option, even if you get into a 4-year. Community college is made to be accessible so that all individuals have a chance to create an opportunity. So think of this as a fresh start, because it's not just students like y'all who are fresh out of high school, for example, but it's also students who maybe have taken multiple gap years. And what I mean by that is like maybe it's some of your parents have, maybe they've tried to go back to school and they've taken a couple of night classes and they're on their way to like maybe getting their associates, and then maybe looking at transferring soon. But it's also a fresh start in the sense that everything from high school doesn't necessarily go away, but when you when you start at a community college, you start fresh. You can, if you failed any classes in high school, you can retake them at the college level, and you can retake them at the college level, and then they'll show up on your new transcript. Your high school transcript won't matter at that point. Ruth said, can adults in their 40s apply for? Yes, they can. Anyone can. That's the whole point. That's the whole connotation of community. It's accessible and open to anybody. You only need to register for the semester prior. So you can register for the summer term, or the fall term, or the spring term. Yeah, it's really, really easy. And it's really affordable too. They have really good payment plans. But then, you know, we're going to tackle this question too. Am I missing out on the full college experience if I go to a CC? And I argue that the experience is what you make of it. How involved you are and committed mostly depends on y'all. The same organizations that are present at 4 years at UCs, at CSUs, are also present at the community college level. You know, it's just community colleges might be a little bit smaller because for a lot of folks, it's only a few years there. And then if folks are looking to get their bachelor's degree, which is the idea, right, behind a 4-year university, they're going to need to transfer to a 4-year regardless. So really, it depends on you. I mean, obviously, there's environmental differences. Like I mentioned before, living on campus isn't necessarily an option at a community college, and the services differ a bit, and your opportunity to be involved difference a bit. But at the end of the day, it's still a school, and you're still getting the classes that you need. That's the idea behind community. And then consider the obvious difference. So like I just mentioned, location is a big factor. So most of the time, folks who go to a community college go because it's local, it's close, and it's a lot cheaper. And then housing wouldn't be a factor, right? And then campus opportunities, which are still available at a community college. They just differ a little bit in a 4-year. Obviously, you want to consider these things, but I put this down here, but mainly in the long run. You also want to consider, like in a 4-year context, right? Location. You can move away from home if you have the ability to live on campus. You can choose what dorm you can live in. You know, that's an opportunity right there. The campus opportunities are a lot bigger. There's probably a lot more professional development support too at a 4-year for people who, you know, once you graduate, you'd have your bachelor's at a 4-year, right? So there'd probably be a lot more opportunities for folks with their bachelor's degrees to, like, you know, have companies come on campus and interview you, or organizations, nonprofits, things like that. So the services differ and opportunities differ a bit, but definitely getting into a 4-year, and I cannot stress this enough, is very much a privilege. So moving on here. Okay, so as you know, in the Twitter post we saw, you know, you want to save money and go to a CC. California community college is actually free for the first 2 years. But to qualify, you have to be first-time full-time students who take at least 12 units a semester. Now, I put an asterisk there because you need at least 60 units to transfer to a 4-year. And that's like a CSU, a UC, or even a private might differ a little bit in the types of classes you have to take. But a typical class has about 3 units at a semester level college. A semester-based college, right? So if you have 3 units and you need 12 units to be a full-time student, that's about what? 4 classes, maybe 3 classes. So it depends. Some classes have more units. Typically, the more difficult the class, the higher the level of the class, the more units you have. But basically, if we do some math here, and I know how much y'all love math, right? 12 units each semester. So if we have 2 years of free tuition, that's 2 semesters per year for a total of 4 semesters. And then each semester I have to take 12 units. So if we do the math, that's 24 units per year. So in the 2 years, that's 48 units. How many do I need to transfer? 60 units. So you actually have to take at least 15 from the get-go in order to graduate and be able to transfer, graduate or be able to transfer. It's a little tricky. We'll get into that later. But basically, to be able to transfer, you need 60 units. In other words, 15 units per semester. So that's just a lot. It's a lot more work. It is a lot, but you know, you want to know what you're getting yourself into. I'm not saying it's a lot harder than a 4-year. I'm not trying to discourage y'all. It's just college in of itself. It's a real push. It's a real push, and especially if you're working. Because if you're working, I would not recommend working full-time and going to school full-time, part-time at least, and make sure your schedule can be flexible with your classes so that you can prioritize school, prioritize your academics, and hopefully you won't need to retake any classes. You won't get sidetracked, and you'll be able to transfer on time, in the 2-year span, so you don't end up paying anything. And then also the other things you have to do is submit a FAFSA or a California DREAM Act in order to qualify for the two years of free tuition. For biologically male students, you have to enroll in selective service. Selective service is essentially a military initiative that was established way back when by a different president. I'm not sure which one. But this essentially means that you have to enroll in this. You have to basically agree to it, agree to be drafted in the event of war. So that, in the event of war, if you're between the ages of, I believe it's 18 to 26, you should look it up and see what the age range is, but then you'd be drafted. It shouldn't be like a scary thing. I've talked to various different folks, but we'd only be drafting, students who enrolled in selective service if we're pretty desperate. And right now we live in very peaceful, somewhat peaceful times, right? There's still things going on, but like at least at home, they're somewhat peaceful times. So it's not something you should worry about, but it's something you have to enroll in when you're 18. Otherwise you can't receive any type of aid from the state or the federal government. And this goes for undocumented students too. But they can enroll online. Undocumented students will need to go to a post office or download the form online and mail it manually. And it takes a little longer to verify, but that's the way you do it if you're an undocumented student. Grants and scholarships. So just really quickly, I'm sure y'all have heard of these before and are aware of what they are, have some sort of idea. But what are grants? Grants are just money from a government or a school that, they give it to a student so that they can go to school. It's free and you don't need to pay it back. And then scholarships are essentially, they're grants in the sense that they're free and you don't need to pay them back, but they're award focused, meaning that they're given to students based on some sort of accomplishment or merit. Given that they're given to students based on accomplishment or merit, it's what it's like, academic based. Robert, thank you for joining us. Sorry, I kept you in the waiting room. I didn't see the notification, but I just noticed it on here. I'm going to try to look more often so I can let people in. But we're just going over grants and scholarships real quick because we're going to get into more nit and grit stuff. I'm also recording the meeting, and y'all get it. You will all have access to it via ParentsSquare. So. But just moving on, scholarships is, based on merit or accomplishment. Merit just means like some sort of accomplishment. So like, for example, there might be a math scholarship at your school for getting A's in all your math classes throughout your time at high school. Or there's also some things like a scholarship, like an athletic scholarship, for performing very well, I don't know, in football and soccer and volleyball or cross country. There might be, if some of those exist and you apply for them, or your coach recommends you for them, or your teacher recommends you for them, that would be a type of scholarship that would be centered around merit or accomplishment. And then one quick note, there's also scholarships available at the college level that you can apply to. So once you get into college and you've saved all that money for college, you can keep getting money and keep applying. And I would recommend you do that. Some of the most important grants that we're going to go over today, there's two. There's the Pell Grant. The Pell Grant is specifically federal government aid given to students who submit the FAFSA and who are FAFSA eligible. The students who are FAFSA eligible, real quick, these are U.S. citizen students, permanent residents, people with green cards, or people with T visas. If you don't fall into these categories, or if you're an undocumented student, you unfortunately cannot submit a FAFSA, but there's a different option for you. I'm going to go over that after. The real key information here that I want you guys to think about and remember is that for FAFSA, it caps at 6 years. What I mean by that is you're only eligible to receive the Pell Grant the free money from the government by submitting your FAFSA for up to 6 years once you start college. So once you start college, like for example, at a community college, and it takes you, let's say it takes you a little longer. Let's say it takes you 3 years. And then when you transfer, let's say you're back on track on a 4-year, and it only takes you 2 years to graduate and get your bachelor's. That's 5 years. So if you're taking any longer, you would have almost exhausted all your Pell Grant. Fortunately, they give you a long time, and like a lot of students end up graduating at least within 6 years. If you go to a 4-year, most folks, you know, as the name intends, you're only there for 4 years. Some people end up doing it in 5 years just because it takes more time, and you know the coursework is a little harder, but you know it's still very possible. But moving on, the Cal Grant. The Cal Grant is a state aid given to students who are California residents or AB 540 eligible, and they submit either a FAFSA or DREAM Act application. So these are, basically this is a grant available to state residents. What I mean by state resident, excuse me. What I mean by state resident is that you've lived here for a certain amount of time. This caps at about 4 years. So you're only eligible to renew it every 4 years. And you also need to meet a certain GPA requirement. The Pell Grant is solely based on your family's income. This is based on your family's income, the Cal Grant, based on your family's income and GPA. So you want to keep up that GPA in this case so you can get the most out of Cal Grant. And it's also important because the Cal Grant, there's 3 different kinds. What I want y'all, can you apply to both? You're automatically considered for both when you submit your FAFSA, and you're automatically considered for the Cal Grant if you're submitting a DREAM Act application and it applies to you. So you're automatically considered for both if you're FAFSA eligible. If you're only DREAM Act eligible, you're only considered for the Cal Grant, not the Pell Grant, because the Pell Grant is federal money, the Cal Grant is state money, and the DREAM Act is California specific. So yeah, but if you're lucky enough to be FAFSA eligible, you're automatically applied to both the Pell and the Cal Grant. And in this case, there's 3 different types of Cal Grant. So for Cal Grant A, that's essentially, this is Cal Grant specific to 4 years. You can't receive it at a community college until you transfer to a 4-year. Cal Grant B, you can receive at a community college, and you can receive at a 4-year if you qualify. There's subtleties between both in terms of qualifying for them, but the main thing I want y'all to remember is to qualify for Cal Grant A, which is you're getting a lot of money from there. And in most cases, if you go to a UC, it'll cover most of your tuition. Most UC tuitions are around $12K, and they're around the same. For CSUs, they're between $5,000 to $7,000, but that's most of your tuition money right there. And tuition is just the cost to be able to take classes. So if you live near, let's say, if you have the opportunity to live near like Santa Cruz and you don't want to live on campus and pay the extra, I don't know, $20K, and you just pay tuition, I mean, that's pretty good deal. Or, you know, SJSU is San Jose State is a CSU, and its tuition isn't too high. And if you receive enough money from the Cal Grant, and maybe even get the Cal Grant B, and maybe some money from the Pell Grant, you'll have enough for tuition too. And then Cal Grant C is for trade schools. You'll get money for books and equipment, but your program has to be at least 4 months long. Some programs are a little shorter than that. Certification programs for like construction or landscaping or something of that category. If you have any questions about these, just let me know. It's just a lot of information. Also need to apply by March 2nd. Every year the deadline is March 2nd, but you can apply until June 15th. March 2nd is the priority deadline. There's limited amount of money. So be considered for the priority deadline, apply by March 2nd so you can get the most out of all the grants, all of them. not just one or the other. So special note, what you can do at a CC, since you don't get Cal Grant at a community college, Cal Grant A specifically, they'll hold it for you. They'll hold it for you until you transfer. And what you need to do at that point, you don't need to do much until you transfer. Once you transfer, you call up CSAC, California Student Aid Commission, the owners of Cal Grant. You call them and you say, hey, I want to use my Cal Grant A reserve grant. So for 2 years, that money's been accumulating on their end. They've been setting it aside for you, and now they're going to give it to you once you like successfully been able to transfer to like a UC, a CSU, or a private school, and they'll give you that money. And yeah, you'll be able to use it at that point because since 4 years are more expensive, I'm assuming they don't want to disperse too much money to folks off the get-go at a CC. In the case of Cal Grant B, you can use that, for your living expenses or for books or for any other costs if you get it when you're going to a CC. But if you do it, you're using your Cal Grant eligibility. And remember, you're only eligible to receive Cal Grant for 4 years. You're like Emilio or Mr. Sanchez. Why can't I just reserve it like I did the Cal Grant money? Or the Cal Grant A money. The reason you can't reserve it like Cal Grant A is because it just works a little bit differently. It's a different type of money and it's a lot smaller. I would recommend you don't use that money if you can. Maybe contact them and be like, hey, I want to put it all towards my reserve grant. See if they can do that on their end, and then they'll save it. That way, by the time you transfer, you have all that money stockpiled up for your 3rd year, or hopefully your 3rd year out of 4 year, and you're able to use it towards your tuition to go to a CSU, a UC, or a private school. And then 4-year students don't have the option to like put their Cal Grant on reserve, unfortunately. But the idea is 4-year schools are a lot more expensive. So like, you wouldn't want to put that money on reserve anyway. You want to be able to use that money to pay for your school each year. And each year it's renewable. So each year you're considered for it. And then, loans. So fun. Loans. So just real quick, loan is money you borrow and have to pay back with interest. Interest is just a percentage that you multiply by the original amount. And then whatever that amount is gets added back to the original amount. And now you owe a little bit more. So let's say I let Ruth borrow $100 and I'm like, okay, Ruth, I'm gonna need 20% interest every month. And she's like, okay. And she takes a month to pay me back. So then she doesn't just owe me $100. She owes me 20% of $100 too, on top of the $100. So that's $120. Interest rates like that aren't going to be too, like in the context of school money, it's not going to be too high of a percentage. It's going to be a lot lower. But if you all see here, I'm going to try to annotate. Sorry. I'm going to go there. I'm going to try to annotate here. But if y'all see here, I want y'all to pay attention to that. I'm going to try to use red. Okay, here we go. Pay attention to this right here, the loans. So y'all see I got my Pell Grant. This is mine actually, from Santa Clara. Y'all see I got my Pell Grant money. And if you look at the total here, I got half of the amount possible for Pell Grant. The total amount's around $6,000. And I got $9,000 from my Cal Grant. And for Cal Grant, for private schools, actually tops out at $9,000. So I got the maximum amount for that. And then the school also gave me need-based grants. Not every school has this, but if they say that if you're low income and you have that financial need, and if they really want you to go to that school, they'll give you that money. I also had work study. We're going to go over that later. I want to talk about these numbers right here, the loans. So direct loan, subsidized and unsubsidized. That's what the sub and unsub mean. So total, if you see here, I took out $7,500 in loans. And that seems like a lot, but it's really not that bad when we're talking about loans. So I'm gonna keep moving here. So as I mentioned, subsidized and unsubsidized. I didn't know. I'm gonna try to erase this real quick. Okay. So as I mentioned, subsidized and unsubsidized loans. Subsidized loans, there's no compounding interest. So remember that analogy I gave where I gave Ruth $100 and with 20% interest for a month, and she took a month to pay me back, and then she owed 120 instead of 100. So no compounding interest until you graduate. Subsidized loans, you don't gain interest while you're in school. So you take it out your first year and you have that loan throughout your 4 years. It doesn't grow, it doesn't get bigger, and the debt pretty much stays the same until you graduate. And then unsubsidized loans, this is referred to as kind of like the bad ones. The good thing is unsubsidized loans are usually a lot smaller, probably somewhere between $500, $3,000, depending on how many loans you took out. Because if y'all remember, my subsidized loan was $5,000. That's a lot of money all at once, right? But the unsubsidized ones are referred to as bad because they do gain interest while you're in school. So while you're in school, I have this example down here, 4% monthly interest on a $5,000 loan. 0.04 times 5,000, that's $200 added each month. That's a lot of money. Again, the interest rates aren't going to be this bad. The interest rates are more comprehensive and they're more, they make more sense. Like this is pretty outrageous. This is like credit card type, like interest, which is pretty high. Or like car loan type interest, which is also pretty high. So yeah, and then I also put this meme here. Don't need to pay school loans if you stay in school. This is why, because you don't need to pay them back while you're in school. And once you graduate, you have a 6-month grace period. And what that grace period is used for, the federal government understands that you need some time to get a job, need some time to get situated, need some time to like find a place, buy some furniture, this and that. And then once you get, settled, situated a little bit, then they start charging you. They're like, okay, it's been 6 months, let's go. So in my case, total, I pulled maybe 20K for school loans. This is me. And the minimum I pay is around 200 to 250 a month. Now, the reason why I'm telling you this is because it's very much doable. I know it seems like a lot of money now, but like me having worked in college 20 hours a week, I was able to conceptualize, what $100 is. $100 goes quick. It's not a lot, especially in the context of adulting when you're paying rent and other expenses. $100 goes quick. With that being said, once you start earning more money full time, payments of $200 for student loans isn't that bad. Granted, I don't have that much in loans. I would be considered the lower end of loans. My brother actually had $60,000 in loans, but he's paid that off. He's 32 now, and I'm only 23. But he was able to work and work his way up and gain a higher salary as a result, and then pay all that debt off. So it is possible. It is possible, and they're very much payable. They're a lot easier to deal with than like a car loan or like a house loan, like a mortgage. Work study. So work study is a college program that allows students to work part-time while attending school. So I talked about this when I showed you guys my financial aid award letter. So you need to work on campus with a job or department that has access to the work study fund from school. What this means is basically there's a fund that the school has, and they've set aside a certain amount for you. So in mine, it was about $3,500. So meaning if for the year, I'm able to work for the whole year part-time at school on campus, then $3,500 gets applied automatically to my bill from school. And then that's $3,500 less. Now, you may be asking, well, if I'm working and all that money is going to, my tuition, I'm not going to get jack. That's not true. You still get paid. This money is aside from that. This is money coming from the federal government to sort of commend students, commend meaning thank students for being such hard workers and working while they're in school, because it is a lot of work. And being someone who worked 20 hours a week and still, I took 5 classes every quarter. I was in a quarter-based system. So instead of 2 semesters, it's 3 quarters. That's a lot. That's a lot of work. But also something to note here, some loans can be converted into more work study. So let's say you got $7,000 in loans and you only got $3,000 in work study. You can ask me like, hey, can I convert like all of it, or at least maybe $5,000 of my loans into work study and have $8,000 in work study instead of loans? Because remember, work study is not a loan. You'll get that money applied to your bill from school if you work. All you got to do, and if you're already working and you're using up some of that work study and you start to run out a little bit and you have those loans, talk to your financial aid office and ask, can I convert this into more work study? I need more work study because I work so many hours, X, Y, Z. And it caps for everyone differently. It depends on your own, like your financial aid application. Like we talked about the FAFSA and the DREAM Act. It depends on those numbers a little bit, but it doesn't hurt to ask, and ask as soon as possible. So what's a resume? It's a document. It's a document used to, present, folks' background, skills, and accomplishments. I realize there's typos here. I'm sorry about that. But like we discussed before, your resume, right? Your resume back when I was talking about CC and how, like, you have that reset, all those accomplishments, all that leadership. Maybe you work part-time and you included that in your 4-year application to your 4-year college. All that, if you applied to a 4-year, you basically submitted a resume. That resets once you started college, like I just mentioned. So if you choose to ascend the CC, that'll reset. So you can only report things from when you started college. So if you were in Leo's club, if you work part-time, if you played football for years, you got all season, all team, first team, all season or whatever, you can't really report that unless that's also happened in college too. So like if you kept working through community college, then you can report that. If in community college you joined like a college access program or like a program that assists college students with like transferring, then you can list that too, because that's something you've been doing since you started college. And then any other programs that you join at that point, or like clubs or organizations. There's a lot to choose from, and a lot of them help you with your transfer application. But that's something to consider too. Like maybe you worked really hard on your 4 years in high school to build up your resume, and you don't want to repeat all that work. Maybe you just want to take that opportunity to go to a 4-year because you've already done all that work, and it seems like a pretty okay, financial aid package. So getting into a transfer program. So I know I've talked a lot about community colleges, but ultimately the idea behind the community college is to get you to your bachelor's, but community college cannot give you the bachelor's. So you go to college and then you apply to another college and then you can graduate. So transfer programs, they're essentially like pathways or patterns, certain courses that you have to take that make you transfer eligible for a 4-year school, like a UC or CSU. So there's such a program called like Transfer Admission Guarantee, or TAG for short. And these are specific to 6 UC campuses. You can see them all there, very lovely. You'll notice that, the really like top ones, or the ones that are considered top schools, like UC Berkeley and UCLA, aren't there. That's because I actually don't know why. I don't know why they're not there. They should be up there because I feel like those schools should be accessible, but that may be because that those schools are very, very selective and they can't really guarantee a certain amount of transfers. These schools can, and these schools love their transfers. So if you go to a CC and your ultimate goal is to go to UC Davis and study biology, then you want to look at the TAG program for UC Davis. And that might be the great pathway for you. Talk to your not your college counselor, your counselor once you're in your community college of choice about the TAG program for UC Davis, if that's the case. And then there's a different program called Associate Degree for Transfer, ADT. And that guarantees priority admission to a CSU campus. Ask about the ADT program too, or ask about it. Pose the question to your counselor at the community college. And ask about ADT. If your ultimate goal is maybe to go into nursing, get your BSN and do your RN license, the CSU campus might be better because the UC campuses actually don't offer nursing. And just fun fact, putting it out there. CSU does, SJSU has a great program, but like, let's say that's your situation. You want that transfer pathway. You want the ADT, not the TAG. There's also other programs out there. These aren't the only ones. Again, talk to your counselor once you're in a community college to find out what programs are there. And it's good to plan out your time at a community college if you go there, and also your time at a 4-year college if that's your case too. You want to make sure you're on track. You want to make sure you're taking the classes you're supposed to be taking. I remember I had to reorganize my whole schedule because I kept adding majors. I started as a sociology major. I added communication, and then I added Spanish. So then, my whole schedule was messed up at different points during my time in college. I had to reorganize myself, and it just happened to work out at the very end. So yeah, without further ado, let's look at the hashtag facts. Shout out to this meme I created, because the whole idea behind college, at least undergraduate, is that you get your undergraduate degree or your bachelor's degree. The Pell Grant, just reiterating, the Pell Grant can only be received for up to 6 years. You're only eligible for 6 years once you start college. Same thing for the Cal Grant, but you're only eligible for 4 years. CCs offer 2 free years of tuition. You need to at least be full-time to receive that benefit, and full-time for them is at least 12 units. But as we discussed earlier, you're gonna need at least 15 units per semester for those 2 years to be able to transfer within those 2 years. So that's gonna be a lot of work. And then you also have the possible resume reset. So if you choose to go to a CC over your 4-year and you're at a crossroads, you're like, oh, but the 4-year, I have to take out like 10,000 in loans. And, oh, but the CC sounds like a better option. Oh, but I got into Davis. I got into my top choice. You know, like what if I just, just go there, at once? Ultimately, that decision is up to you. But something to consider in that situation is the resume reset. In the case of a TAG program, like I mentioned before, that's transfer admission guarantee. If you finish those courses at a community college, you'll be guaranteed admission to one of those few campuses. So that's something else to consider too, if that's a pathway you want. Also available to folks that want that restart. Maybe high school wasn't for you, life happens and you don't do your best. But then all of a sudden things click once you graduate high school. You're like, all right, I'm not gonna procrastinate no more. I'm gonna be mature, I'm gonna be on top of it. I'm gonna still keep my part-time job and I'm gonna still go to school. If that's the case, then it might be the route for you because you're able to do that fresh start. And that way colleges only look at your time from when you started community college rather than the time when you started high school. And then like I mentioned before at the very beginning of the slide and the very beginning of the presentation, the purpose of going to college is to obtain that bachelor's degree. And then any other degree you want beyond that, your grad degree, your law degree, your doctorate, right? And then if that's the case, use a transfer pathway if you need it. So like I just mentioned, if you go to a CC and you need a transfer, look into those transfer pathways and plan ahead. I'm gonna leave it up open to questions, but I kind of want to apply all the information that we learned just really quick. I know like I've taken up a lot of y'all's time. Thank you all for being here. And it was a really lengthy presentation. But now I want to like bring it back. And what I mean by that, oh, thank you. Oh, you're welcome, Ruth. Thank you so much. Oh my gosh. I just want to bring it back real quick into the context of COVID-19. So the reality is CSU campuses, like I mentioned before, are going online. Because they're going online, you may think, wow, maybe it's not worth it. Maybe I should just go to a CC. But going to a CC and passing up your opportunity at a 4-year, if it was a good financial aid package, especially if it was a really good financial aid package, you really want to redo all your work. I'm not saying that it's harder at that point, but if you put in a lot of work at your 4 years at the high school level, and you put in a lot of work into those college jobs, like you kept redoing your essay questions and all that stuff, and you basically put yourself through hell. It might be worth it to just go to the 4-year at that point, all things concerned, like finances and whatever considered. Also considering the COVID situation isn't permanent. It's not permanent. We're going to be out of it at some point. Oh, okay. Someone came in. Oh, she went away. Okay. But it's not permanent. It's not permanent. It's going to end at some point. And if it does end and you jump ships all of a sudden over the summer and said, hey, I don't want to go to SJSU. I want to go to De Anza. And then a year happens after De Anza and you're like, damn, I wish I had gone to SJSU. Just make sure, I just want to make sure y'all are informed and consider all the factors before you make a decision like that. And, just to add my own little note there, a lot of community colleges actually offer online courses for a lot of their courses. Why? Because they understand that a lot of their students are older students that have work and families to take care of during the day. So the only time they have available is a couple nights during the week. So that's when they do their homework. That's when they look at their lecture notes. And some classes don't really have like instruction periods. What I mean by that is They don't have, they're really hands off. It's just homework. Maybe it's like a discussion post on Canvas, and then you turn in that homework, and then your instructor is there for questions and stuff. Your instructor doesn't actually teach. So I'm not saying they're all classes like that, but at community classes or community colleges, I have seen classes like that. But that's just a convenience, folks. So it's really interesting to see like how now students are saying that's an inconvenience. Like, I want class instruction, I want bang for my buck. But you know, back then, or at least before COVID, it used to be thought as a convenience. It used to be thought out as almost like a privilege. But yeah, that's it for me. Do any of you have questions? I'm gonna enable voice if y'all want to use voice.